TCI, total cost involved, rear end, torque arm, and forward 9-inch axle installation in a 65 Mustang. People ask if this is a 3-link or a 4-link, and I tell them it's a 3.5 link because the third link torque arm is one hell of a link and encases your axle, turning your underside of your Mustang into a sideways Eiffel Tower for all you romantics out there. Everyone keeps asking me, hey, when are you going to do an install video? No, I'm lying. No one asked me shit. I'm making this video to help the next guy and to recall half the crap I did when I need to reference back. Must-haves. Impact gun and a drill. I got the Ryobi dual. In fact, this video is sponsored by my 2 Ryobi impact gun and drills. I also ordered the Milwaukee drill bits. That too is sponsoring this video, so click the link below so I get paid my 25 cents. Suspension might intimidate you. You've got this, man. You and me both. We'll take this road together. And when you drive and there's a catastrophic mistake, event, I'll be somewhere else. But use this video as a guide. But keep in mind, you're responsible for your work, maintenance, and your own vehicle. What's your experience with axles? My experience boils down to a C4 Corvette with the independent rear suspension. Currently, I have a GMC Sierra with a locker in that. Remember my Jeep, old Jeepy? I had a straight axle on that bad boy. The last TCI video I did, the installation on the front end, people smashed the dislike button. Maybe they wanted more of an explanation on what I did. So give me a freaking like on this video because I'm going to explain a few things on how to connect this up. In this video, I'll be the teacher and learn you a few important lessons to know. The first thing to know, step 1, if you want to install the suspension and you went to school for kids who can't read well, yeah, it's tough to read/decipher this manual. But you can watch Joe Daddy, the 2 series part where he did Brooklyn Pony. I'm an amateur. Joe Daddy/Barry, he's the pro. So reference back to his page. Step 2, bolt alert. Become familiar with the bolts, specifically the first 10 half-inch bolts, which come in different lengths. Not the black bolts that are very important and are used to suck the plate into the right position. In fact, follow along as I write down the sizes on the page. For example, page 2, pick 2. Write down bolt size 6.5 times 2 on the page, just like I did in the picture. Page 3, pick 1. Write down 3.5 times 2, x2. Page 5, pick 1. Write down 4-inch times 4. Page 6, pick 1. Write 5.5 times 2. And these are the first 10 half-inch bolts. I'll go find these bolts and annotate the size on the head itself. Think me later. Write down the size on the back of the bolt. So if it's 6.5, write 6.5. Seeing how I've saved you a bunch of work, let's move on to the next step. Keep an ear out for when I say bolt alert because I'll be referring to these bolts that I had you write down on both the page and the bolt itself. If the bolts don't fit, don't force them into the hole. It's okay to shave a little bit of metal off, but don't use the impact gun to get that bolt in. I don't have time to explain why, but if you don't believe me, you'll be heading to the hardware store with a bunch of damaged bolts. Step 3, become very familiar with the manual and the parts. I know this is a duh statement, real common sense. Let me break it down for you. Lay your parts on the ground so that you can pull them when you need them based off of the manual. By the way, it's become apparent to me that there are multiple versions of this manual. So if you're looking at a different manual than I am, just follow along with the pictures. I'm sorry about that, man. First pick on page 2 shows the finished product. Page 2, pick 2, the subframe support plate. To mount it to the original mount hole of the leaf springs. Sorry, I got ahead of myself and I didn't have footage for when I installed it. But remember the bolt sizes. Bolt alert! 6.5-inch bolt. That's the bolt that we're using to put this plate on. Pick 3, same page. Get ready to drill some holes on the top to install those 3 small black bolts, sucking and putting this plate up to the proper position for the rest of the install a little later on. Pick 4. On top in the cab, here's a picture of the subframe support plates. I had to do some hammering inside of the cab. Pick 5, page 3 of 14. Bolt alert. You know those 3.5-inch bolts? We're installing it in this picture, but this will not be the last time we see these bolts. We're going to mount the subframe connector front channel to this plate using a 3.5-inch bolt in the bottom hole. Pick 6. I'm changing the name of the subframe connector to frame box. Frame box is the new name. I use the jack and a 2x4 to get the frame box and the connector up with a mallet to convince it, the frame box, to go into place. Pick 7. Start drilling with the 5/16 bit. Start one of the holes, the black bolts, to suck up the frame box into the best spot. After the first hole, put the rest of the bolts in, 6 on each side, 12 in total. Make sure they're flush. Pick 10, page 4 of 14, blah, blah, blah. Make sure the plates look like the picture. Pick 11, seriously, this is important. Start the first set of holes on the outside Then drill on the inside. Outboard first, inboard second. And drill all 4 bolt holes for the 4 bolts. Don't be a jackass like me and only drill 2 bolt holes, because then you'll be taking off a bunch of shit later on. Pick 12. This is not a bolt alert, but remember those 3.5-inch bolts from pick 5? Well, now they're being moved to a different hole, the more forward hole right here in the subframe support plate, which also goes through the subframe connector. Now adding the trailing arm brackets, which are kind of the shape of an L. We're installing the L trailing arm brackets outboard, and now, just for this moment, we're letting it dangle. Pick 13. Lift the cross member into place. I used Jack, my best friend. Pick 14, page 5 of 14. Install 4 of the 4-inch bolts. Wait for it. Bolt alert! Those 4-inch bolts. Pick 15. With the rear of the cross member lining up with the rear holes and plates. Pick 16 and 17. Pull the 6.5-inch bolts out just a little bit and reinstall with the sleeves, the larger sleeves on the inside. Pick 18 and 19, page 16 of 14. Install the link bar in the lower hole using the last bolt alert 5.5-inch bolts, 2 of them. And that's the last bolt alert of the first 10 bolts. And tighten everything down. According to the manual, you'll need a chisel to pry out the muffler mounting plates, but in my setup, my vehicle, they were just bolted on, so I unbolted them. Pick 21 and 22 passenger side cross member channel bracket with Panhard Bar needs to be slid into place. I held mine up with a trusty friend, the jack, and a breaker bar holding it up. Hammered it into place. Pick 23. Page 7. Here's what the mounting plates look like inside of the trunk. Probably best to order a hex bit socket kit. Made my life a lot easier. I ended up cutting an Allen wrench and ended up putting it in a socket. It was really janky, but it worked. That's why I bought this hex kit. Pick 24 and 25. Drill a 3/8 bit into the 3 holes. Once you've drilled the 3 holes, go ahead and put a bolt in the rear so you can hold the channel up. Be sure to use the guide plate to ensure the hole goes to the first and second hole straight through. Bolt in the rear hole. Here is a sequence to installing this. Take the sliding tube, and before you put it on, because if you put it on, you won't be able to get the bolts through. Take it, put it in your hand, put the bolts through. Then put it on the sway bar. Then install it into the bracket. All before you put in the bushing and this, whatever the hell this is called. But after all that, go ahead and install the coilover and sway bar mount cross member. I don't have any footage of this because I was too busy using my head to hold it up. It's more of a 2-person job. It'd be a lot easier if you had 2 people to sandwich it between the 2 channels and put the bolts in. Heads up. Skip to page 11 because we ordered a Ford 9-inch from TCI and they did all the welding in-house. The torque arm is shipped with a slider assembly. We need to install this, so put anti-seize on it and be sure not to cross-thread it. You'll find a slider in this fancy container. To be honest, I actually installed the slider after I installed the torque arm onto the axle. Makes things a little easier. Install that torque arm using a 1/2-inch, 3.5 length bolt. Instead, I use a 4-inch bolt because I destroyed a 3.5-inch bolt and I got it from the hardware store. Install the shocks on top. Install with a 1/2-inch, 2 3/8 link with a thinner nut. Page 12, the shock bolts on bottom using a 6-inch bolt with a spacer. The spacer butts up against the axle, and I put it in the bottom hole because that is the lowest setting to make the car sit at its lowest. I might move it up later, but I'm not sure. I'll make it easy for you guys. I'll just read straight from the manual. The pinion support tubes have left and right rod ends to facilitate pinion angle adjustment. Adjust the tubes approximately the same length with equal amounts of threads showing on the rod end. Install the tubes with the right hand rod ends inside the top brackets using a yada yada. Hey, you know which ones to use. I watched Joe Daddy's page and he basically said the lefty loosey righty tighty rod end goes on top and the reversed goes on bottom. So keep that in mind. Now we're ready to get this axle installed under the car. Put it under the car, and then we're going to start dropping the vehicle onto the axle. Once the axle and the torque arm gets to the right length, instead of putting a bolt through, I just put zip ties through the hole so that it moved around a little bit. I think this helped out a little bit more. And this is what the finished product looks like with everything all connected. Be sure to cut the zip ties from the front torque arm connected to the cross member. Lift it up. It takes a little bit of muscle, and go ahead and put that bolt in. I forget what size it is, but let me look at the manual quick and I'll tell you. It's a 3-inch bolt. So hopefully I haven't destroyed any 3-inch bolts and you just put them in. Otherwise you get them from the hardware store. Bars are installed using 5/8 and 2 3/4 length bolts. We're going to install the Panhard Bar. It's pretty self-explanatory. Make sure you watch Joe Daddy because he does a good job of showing how to get the left to right centering of the axle. Before you install the sway bar, make sure you put it above and forward of the axle. I don't have any footage of it, but I look like a monkey fucking a football trying to take that sway bar and put it in front of the axle. As you can see right here, I'm screwing it down using the cool hex bits I bought. Link in the description. Next thing to do is install the brakes. Caliper and rotors, Willwood.
Important sockets. Be sure to buy them.